Our daily Bible reading for January 27th. Our reading today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14, we'll be reading verses 1 through 21. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work with him." For Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people, because they held him to be a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." And the king was sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl. And she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took the body and buried it, and they went and told Jesus. Now, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. And taking 5 loaves and 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. And a few thoughts. In our passage today comes the death of John the Baptist. His death will send our Savior out in a boat where he could find seclusion. To the one whom Jesus called the greatest one born to woman would come a horrific end at the hands of a vindictive wife of Herod the Tetrarch. She would manipulate her daughter into convincing Herod to behead John as a gift. In reality, it was John's conviction to truth that cost him his life. For he had told Herod, "It is not lawful to have Herodias, his brother's wife, as his own." Herod disliked John for this reason, but he feared him because John was regarded as a prophet by the people. This fact kept him from killing John. The inspired writer Mark tells us, "For Herod was afraid of John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and kept him safe. And when he heard him, he was very perplexed, but he used to enjoy listening to him." Mark chapter 6 and verse 20. What a position to be put in, enjoying the company of such a holy man as John, yet in an awkward position of having this man condemn you for your lifestyle. John must have been quite a spectacle to behold, a Nazarite in camel's hair who knew the kingdom was about to arrive, preaching in prison. How thoughtful Herod was to have allowed such a thing to happen to a great man as John. Such is to be expected when morality and virtue are thrust aside for the sake of pride. Secular history records the decadent lifestyle that the Herods were known to have lived. Treachery, murder, deception were commonplace in this household. Generations of this behavior existed in Judea. The apple didn't fall far from the tree, as the saying goes. For it was his father, Herod the Great, who murdered the children when he suspected a successor had been born to him. Herod did not have the moral backbone to stand up for the truth, and thus ended the life of one of the greatest men in the Bible. Question of the day. Have you ever had to keep an oath in spite of extenuating circumstances that you had not foreseen? And a thought to to meditate on this day. Throughout history, there have been notable rulers who have kept, quote unquote, holy men around them in their courts. Some have kept them on the straight and narrow, while others themselves were corrupted by the power that surrounded them. Those are our thoughts for today, January 27th.